On December 16, the United States, under President Donald Trump, expanded a travel ban to include Burkina Faso among nearly 20 other countries, citing national security and vetting concerns. Only weeks later, Burkina FASO responded by imposing reciprocal visa restrictions on U.S. citizens, invoking the principle of reciprocity and framing its decision as equal treatment under international norms. This dramatic exchange marks one of the most visible diplomatic escalations between Washington and a West African state in recent years, emerging amid ongoing regional insecurity and shifts in alliances. But what does this retaliatory step actually signal about Burkina Faso's evolving geopolitical strategy? Is this a calculated assertion of sovereign equality, or a deeper indication of growing distance from traditional Western partners? And how might this tit-for-tat interplay reshape the broader diplomatic landscape in the Sahel and beyond? Before any headline or immediate reaction, it is necessary to step back and observe the broader context shaping the relationship between Burkina Faso and Washington, because diplomatic gestures rarely appear out of nowhere and almost always reflect accumulated layers of pressure, regional instability, and strategic repositioning. In the Sahel over recent decades, Burkina Faso has been part of a security framework heavily influenced by Western partners, especially after the expansion of counterterrorism operations led by the United States and European allies in Mali, Niger, and neighboring countries. At the same time, analysts suggest that these security arrangements produced ambiguous results, with limited progress in controlling violence and a growing internal perception of loss of political autonomy. According to the BBC article on the evolution of relations in the Sahel, governments in the region began questioning whether the external presence truly addressed local priorities or merely reproduced a logic inherited from the post-colonial period. This debate gained strength after successive changes of power in Burkina Faso and nearby countries, where new leadership began advocating for a more assertive foreign policy, less automatically aligned with Washington. According to AP News, this movement should not be read simply as rupture, but as an attempt to redefine margins of maneuver in an increasingly multipolar international environment. Here arises the first question that deserves attention. If this history reveals growing tension between internal expectations and external commitments, to what extent could recent decisions be interpreted as the continuation of a process started years ago, rather than merely a reaction to Donald Trump or an isolated event? Within this broader context, who was the main audience for this analytical message? Exploring this perspective helps to understand why the Sahel has become one of the most sensitive geopolitical spaces at the moment, and why every gesture from Ouagadougou tends to carry meanings far beyond what appears in the headline. In recent weeks, Burkina Faso imposed travel restrictions on U.S. citizens, a move that immediately drew international attention and raised questions about its intent and implications. According to ABC News, this decision may indicate growing frustration with Washington's approach to the Sahel and could reflect an effort to assert greater sovereignty in foreign policy. Observers suggest that these measures are not merely symbolic, but part of a broader recalibration of diplomatic relations, as analysts believe Ouagadougou is signaling dissatisfaction with the pace and nature of U.S. engagement in regional security issues. At the same time, some reports point out that this action may be influenced by recent statements from Donald Trump regarding African security funding, raising the question of whether Burkina Faso's response could be understood as reactive to perceived external pressure or proactive in redefining its strategic posture. Furthermore, there are indications from the AP News report that neighboring countries are closely monitoring the situation, as similar dynamics could affect regional cooperation frameworks and counterterrorism initiatives. This raises another critical question: what are the potential ripple effects on diplomatic and economic ties with the United States? And could this action influence the perception of Burkina Faso among other Western partners, Also, analysts suggest that the move may serve internal political objectives, signaling strength and decisiveness to domestic audiences, while simultaneously sending a message to external actors, which prompts the deeper question of how domestic and international considerations are intertwined in shaping these decisions. By examining the facts presented in these reports, it becomes clear that Burkina Faso is navigating a complex set of pressures and opportunities, balancing historical relationships with Washington against emerging regional and global realities. Understanding the significance of Burkina Faso's travel restrictions requires looking beyond the immediate headlines and considering the broader geopolitical implications. According to ABC News analysts, suggest that this move may reflect a shift in how countries in the Sahel perceive their relationship with the United States and Western allies. It could indicate a growing desire to pursue policies that are less dependent on external guidance while still engaging selectively in international cooperation at the same time. Some observers point out that such actions may influence regional power dynamics and security arrangements, raising the question of whether Washington's influence in the Sahel could be gradually recalibrated or challenged. As Ouagadougou explores new strategic alignments, the AP News report emphasizes that these developments may also affect economic partnerships, including aid, investment, and trade agreements, prompting analysts to consider how such diplomatic gestures could signal caution to foreign investors or encourage alternative alliances. Furthermore, this situation brings up deeper questions about credibility and perception. How might U.S. citizens and policymakers interpret these restrictions? And could the measures impact public opinion on both sides of the Atlantic, as some analysts believe? Every action sends signals that are interpreted not only by the directly involved parties, but by neighboring states and international institutions. Exploring this perspective helps to frame the decision within a larger pattern of shifting alliances and strategic postures, suggesting that the issue is not isolated, but part of an evolving dialogue about influence, sovereignty, and regional stability, and ultimately raises the question of what signals Burkina Faso is sending to the broader international community while navigating its own internal priorities. While it is too early to draw definitive conclusions, analysts believe Burkina Faso's travel restrictions on U.S. citizens could have several cascading effects across diplomatic, security, and economic dimensions. According to ABC News, some observers suggest that these measures may prompt Washington to reassess its engagement strategy in the Sahel, potentially leading to adjustments in aid, training, or joint operations at the same time. The AP News report highlights that neighboring countries may closely monitor Ouagadougou's approach, as it could influence regional cooperation frameworks and affect cross-border security initiatives. This raises questions about whether other Sahelian states may consider similar moves, and how such decisions might reshape collective approaches to counterterrorism. Analysts point out that economic impacts could emerge, particularly in sectors that rely on tourism, investment, or international travel, prompting consideration of whether local businesses may face indirect consequences from restricted access to foreign nationals. Furthermore, these actions may influence Burkina Faso's perception on the global stage, as some observers suggest, signaling a more assertive stance in foreign policy and testing the flexibility of existing diplomatic relationships. It also raises the strategic question of how Washington may respond without escalating tensions, and whether dialogue or negotiation could mitigate potential misunderstandings. According to analysts, the long-term consequences may extend beyond immediate diplomatic exchanges, affecting how external partners assess risk, reliability, and willingness to cooperate in the Sahel region. Ultimately, this situation invites reflection on whether Burkina Faso's decision could alter regional influence patterns, shift alliances, or create openings for alternative partnerships while maintaining an interpretation grounded in fact and historical context. As this situation continues to unfold, several critical questions remain unanswered, inviting deeper analysis and interpretation according to ABC News and AP News. Some analysts suggest that Burkina Faso's travel restrictions could be part of a broader reevaluation of its strategic partnerships, raising the question of which global actors may become more influential in the Sahel in the coming months at the same time. Observers point out that this move could prompt Washington to reconsider the balance between pressure and engagement, leading to the question of how flexible U.S. foreign policy may be in adapting to emerging regional priorities further. It is worth asking how neighboring countries will interpret Burkina Faso's actions, and whether similar measures may be considered elsewhere in the region, suggesting that the decision could set precedents for diplomatic signaling. Analysts believe another key perspective involves the domestic dimension, how internal political considerations intersect with foreign policy, and whether these actions are aimed at consolidating influence or demonstrating autonomy, while still engaging selectively with global partners. This raises the ongoing question of how Burkina Faso balances internal legitimacy with external relations, and what signals it seeks to send to both audiences. Finally, examining these developments prompts reflection on the broader implications for the Sahel as a whole. Could these gestures indicate shifts in regional alliances, recalibration of international influence, or emerging opportunities for alternative partnerships? And how might these dynamics shape the future of security, diplomacy, and economic engagement in West Africa? Exploring these questions helps frame the issue not as a single event, but as part of a complex and evolving geopolitical landscape, encouraging viewers to consider the multiple layers of meaning behind every decision.